folks, this is Rainiac bringing you another Series 7 Doctor Who review. This time it's Cold War, and we'll just get the housekeeping out of the way. This review will contain heavy spoilers for the episode in question, so if you haven't seen it yet, and I recommend that you do, so there's a hint, please do not watch or listen to this review until you've seen the episode in full. Now that's out of the way, let's get down to business. The intro. Really like this intro. Again, it was a nice different change of pace from last week's. If they keep alternating between plot stuff and Clara character stuff in the introduction, that's going to work pretty well. And now I've said that, they'll probably not do that. They'll all be one or the other for the rest of the damn series. This little introductory scene gave us a very nice insight into the characters of Captain Zhukov, Lieutenant Stevashin, I think I'm pronouncing that right, and of course Professor Grushenko. These were the three main characters aboard the submarine. Everyone else was kind of window dressing, and more on that a bit later on. As I say, I like that their characters were established so early on. You've got the proud Captain Zhukov, who's not adverse to suggestions when he's the first one to suggest calling off the drill until tomorrow. Then you've got Stevashin, who's your typical asshole, who's more devoted to the cause than his actual commander. Hence why he was saying, we must run the drill again, Western aggression, blah 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 blah. And then you had Professor Grushenko, who I really liked in this episode, and even in this early scene, it was established that he was the comic relief when he comes in singing Ultravox's at Vienna while listening to it on a Walkman. You can tell it was set in the 80s because, you know, Walkmans, come on, who's used a Walkman in the past 5 years? And now I've said that, people will say, I've used a Walkman in the past 5 years, in the comments. Whatever. Also in this intro we got our first appearance of the monster for the episode, and this was really nicely done because unlike some episodes where you immediately see the monster in all its glory and it looks impressive, but then there's nothing else to see, they did a good job of kind of slowly building up to the big reveal of who the monster was. You only see a hand when it reaches out and grabs that poor guy by the throat. So it's building up nicely to a full unveiling and increasing the tension bit by bit, which is good storytelling. I would have liked to have maybe seen the Ice Warrior go on the rampage a little bit more at the start of the episode, not because I'm a bloodthirsty son of a bitch, but maybe it just would have showcased the monster. In fact, let's just drop the pretense. It's an Ice Warrior, okay? This is a spoiler review. It's an Ice Warrior. I would have liked to have seen the Ice Warrior go on the rampage a little more at the start, especially because Captain Zhukov tells the Doctor later on, there's 12 of us left. But given that this was a fully manned submarine, I would suspect there would be more personnel than just 12 guys. Alright, 13 if you count Stevashin, who at that point anyway was dead, although they just said they couldn't find him. Now, they killed off a couple of guys on camera. The guy that got grabbed by the throat, I'm assuming, was killed, and the guy that smacked his head on the metal door didn't show up again for the entire episode, so I'm assuming he died as well. But all the other crew members that the Ice Warrior killed, or drowned when the sub crashed, or whatever, died off camera. Either that, or this was just a continuity error or an oversight by the production team. I suppose it doesn't really matter that much in the grand scheme of things. Now, I loved the Doctor and Clara and Clara's entrance into the submarine. It's been a while since we had an episode where the Doctor and his companion, in this case Clara, go to a location mistakenly intend to go to somewhere else. A good example of this would be in Tooth and Claw, where they think they're going to a concert at the... Off the top of my head, I think it's either Rod Stewart or the Beatles, and they end up in 18th century Victorian Scotland instead. So I quite like that. Why the Doctor had a Barbie doll on his person, God only knows. I think it was just a visual gag, and the whole humour of being, why the hell would someone like the Doctor have a Barbie doll? Or maybe it reminded me of Rose. I don't know, I'm just guessing there. It seemed like a strange visual gag that didn't really have much bearing on anything. And of course, it came back when the Professor found the sonic screwdriver next to the Barbie doll. Now, the TARDIS disappearing by itself was obviously a plot device designed to get the TARDIS out of the way so it couldn't be used in the conclusion. But I actually kind of like that because, like the sonic screwdriver, and more on that a bit later on, it has become a bit of a deus ex machina as of late. Not as much as the screwdriver, where the screwdriver can now apparently do anything it wants, such as lifting up a heavy stone door, like last week. But no, I like that Mark Gatiss got it out of the way early on, so that couldn't feature into the plot. And also increase the sense of danger for the Doctor and Clara. Oh, there goes the TARDIS. Well, he's screwed. Not that I actually felt that, but that maybe was the kind of thing that you were supposed to get from it. And apparently the HAD setting is a throwback to old school episodes that it's appeared in the past. I mean, having not seen those episodes firsthand, I can't say for certain, but I believe it is a throwback to old school episodes. Now, I personally love the scene where Skeldeck was first revealed to be Grand Marshal Skeldeck, and we find out his name and that he's an Ice Warrior, even though it was there was a lot of publicity that, oh hey look, the Ice Warriors are back for this series, prior to the episode going out. It was nice that Doctor, when he first met him, tried to show him respect. He obviously knew who Skeldeck was because of the legends about him from the planet Mars, and in some ways Skeldeck and the Doctor are quite similar characters. They're both the last of their kind. They are both, I would not say respected, but renowned warriors, and they have history together in so much that the Doctor has encountered the Ice Warriors before, like when he says, we go way back. Now, I've heard some people complain about the new voice for the Ice Warriors, as provided by Nicholas Briggs, and how it's much too much like the Jadoon's voice, but I actually kind of liked it. I have seen some footage of old Ice Warrior episodes and how they speak in that, so I had something to compare it to. And the hiss is still present, but the hissing is a lot more subtle now, and I actually kind of prefer that. I may have just committed heresy on the Doctor Who fan community, but I actually prefer this voice to the old one. I may be the only person in the whole world that thinks that, however, and apparently I am, because a lot of people are complaining about it. Skeldeck sounded like a really menacing villain, except of course he's not actually a villain, so we'll call him an alien or a monster, or a character. He sounded like a really menacing character. There we go. Also, what is it with Matt Smith era Doctor Who and monsters being attacked by people with cattle prods? It happened in the Rebel Flesh, now it's happened here, and both times, of course, that leads to all hell breaking loose, and both times the cattle prod is wielded by the most arsehole character in the story, although, of course, the foreman Cleves, she actually repents and becomes good again. Stevishan doesn't really get time to before he's murdered by the Ice Warrior. I really like the nice, subtle reference to the Time War when the captain says, and he wouldn't smell it on you, Doctor. It, of course, being war, battle, being a soldier. And this now makes it 2 weeks out of 2 that there's been a fleeting reference to the Time War. I'm possibly reading way too much into this, but is it just possible they're building up to something for the series finale or the 50th anniversary special that involves the Time War? Because I kind of like that. Also, I like how even people that the Doctor has just met, like Captain Zukov here, can sense he has a dark past. Again, it fits with the character of the Doctor. He is, after all, the oncoming storm. He ended the Time War single-handedly. He killed the Daleks and the Time Lords. Another scene that was really well done was the bit where Clara goes in with Skeldeck, who's all chained up on the piping, and she talks to him, and she salutes him, and she tries to talk to him through the Doctor. Or rather, the Doctor tries to talk to him through her. It was a very similar scene, I thought, to that one scene in Dalek, where Rose is locked in with the Dalek. In fact, in a lot of ways, this episode reminded me of Dalek, and in case you're wondering, that's a very good thing, because Dalek was one of my favourite Christopher Eccleston episodes of all time, possibly one of my favourite episodes of the entire new series of all time, and certainly one of my favourite Dalek episodes since the series came back. The fact that they gave Skeldeck a daughter was kind of an interesting attempt to flesh him out more as a character, as opposed to having just be this huge, big, rampaging, I can't even say rampaging, this big, rampaging alien monster. And when he left his armour, it reminded me a lot of Alien. I mean, they even said, it's in the walls. If that's not a subtle reference to it, well, not subtle, if that's not a homage to Alien, I'm not sure what is. I think Mark Gatiss brought some very interesting ideas to the table to try and bring the Ice Warriors up to date and make them relevant to the new series of Doctor Who, and for the most part they actually worked. We also got some more development for Clara here, especially just after Skeldeck gets out of the room. Her desire to please the Doctor is kind of surprising given that she just met him, but it really came out well in those scenes. I also like that it's only been 3 episodes since Clara joined the TARDIS, joined the Doctor. Okay, technically it's 5 because Oswin and the Snowmen. But it's only been 3 episodes for this Clara, and she's getting used to the whole concept of time travel, very quickly. In fact, for a lot of this episode, she was introduced to the TARDIS translation matrix, the idea that time can be rewritten, the saving the world thing, which I'll mention a bit more when we come back to the finale. So I like that. It's okay, it might seem to some as very quick development, but there's only 8 episodes in this series, and considering that they're going to probably build up to something huge for the finale and the 50th anniversary, they kind of have to get this done and dusted so that Clara is ready as a companion. I'm probably not expressing myself in the best possible way there, but hopefully the point I'm trying to make comes across. Now, when Grand Marshal Skeldak attacked Lieutenant Stevishin, and then Stevishin went on to mention an alliance that he could strike up between the two of them, I honestly thought he was going to turn traitor on his comrades, because when it comes to base under siege type episodes, this is quite a standard thing that happens. So when he was then killed off camera, and his body turned up about 10 minutes later, I was actually kind of surprised. Although thinking about it, it does make sense, because it was Stevishin that shocked him with a cattle prod and led to him being chained up. So it's unlikely that even an Ice Warrior would forget that in a hurry. This was kind of one problem for the episode, and in a way it was a problem, in a way it was inconsequential. But apart from the captain, the lieutenant, and the professor, none of the other people on that submarine had any sort of character or purpose. They were just red shirts whose entire meaning for being there was to pad out the submarine with bodies and provide some fresh victims for Skeldak. Now, speaking of victims for Skeldak, dismembered bodies in Doctor Who, that's kind of grisly. But I liked it because you didn't see too much, and it left a lot to the imagination. And yet the sight of that arm sticking up all mangled and poking out and bent in directions it should never be bent was still very unsettling. And a couple of minutes later, we also got a couple of drops of blood, which might be a first since Doctor Who returned. I know it's a family show and all that, but the way people get hurt or killed in this show, you would expect just sometimes to see a little bit of blood. I mean, people have been shot and there hasn't been a single bullet hole or blood around the wound. I'm not asking for hardcore violence here, I'm just asking for a little bit more realism, maybe. I mean, you'd have to go overboard with it. I mean, you can't have episodes where the violence is the main factor every time. It worked with Dalek, it works here, but if you had that all the time, it would get boring and repetitive. I should also mention it's kind of ironic that the actor playing Stevishin, who's Tobias Menzies, has actually been in a TV show where he was on board a submarine, and although he wasn't a crew member, he did turn traitor and strike up an alliance with the villains. I can't remember the name of the show off the top of my head, but I'll include it in the annotations or something, or maybe in a caption that may be appearing along the screen as I speak. Now, of the other characters on board the sub, not counting the nameless red shirts, the captain was okay. He was played by a veteran actor called Liam Cunningham. He's a good actor, he did a good performance, but maybe he was the weakest of the three stereotypes, the three main characters on board the sub. Okay, so we get that he's a proud Soviet submarine captain. He's not afraid to stand up to his men. He's not afraid to listen to new ideas. He's not that surprised when he says time travelers and the Martians. Alright, so initially he says that's impossible, but as the story progresses, the captain is a lot more receptive to these new ideas. But the best of the three was by far the Professor Grishenko, played by David Warner, again, a very good veteran actor. He probably had the best line of dialogue in the entire story when he went, I must know the future, Ultravox, do they split up? As I say, best line of the story by far. I like the Professor a lot. He got some pretty good lines of dialogue, and he was a nice contrast to all the serious military types that were running around the submarine, which of course you need, because it's a Soviet submarine, and we're at the height of the Cold War. Another thing I liked, you can tell I really liked a lot about this episode, can't you? But another thing I liked was once Skeldak actually left his armour, you only saw little glimpses of him. You saw the hands, you saw his hands, you saw his two red eyes, but you didn't see the full creature out of its shell, which made him a lot more intimidating. If they had shown the full creature out of its shell, okay, again, you'd have had the immediate impact of this is what an Ice Warrior looks like under the armour, but then there would have been nowhere else for it to go. They kind of ruined that at the end when the helmet raised up and you could see his face, but at least you could only see his face. You couldn't see what he looked like completely out of the armour. I personally liked the CGI they used for his head. Others again have disagreed and thought it wasn't that good. When I found out the Ice Warriors were reptiles, my first thought was, please don't be too much like the Silurians. Please don't be too much like the Silurians in terms of physical appearance. Unfortunately, I think they managed to nail a distinctive enough look for the new Ice Warriors, and if they return, I will be very happy if that's how they look from now on. Now, the final scene was Scarlet going for the nuclear warhead button, and the Doctor threatening to blow the sub up before he could reach it, or as Sebastian told Scarlet earlier, mutually assured destruction. I loved that scene. It was a really clever parallel of the actual Cold War. You've got two sides, both have access to a great weapon, both have the capability of using it, but both are too frightened to pull the trigger. As I say, a brilliant parallel to what happened in the actual Cold War. There were parts of the ending that I didn't like, however. The conclusion felt a little bit rushed, but it did make sense that Clara was able to get through to Skeldak by invoking memories of his daughter. You know, we sang the songs of the Red Snows. Or sorry, you sang the songs of the Red Snows. The other Ice Warriors showing up out of nowhere to rescue Skeldak, that was a little cliche and was probably done to give the Ice Warrior species as a whole a chance to return in the future, say in a couple of series' time. Mark Gatiss has said that he is a big fan of the Ice Warriors and he would love to bring them back again for another story or two. He's got more ideas to bring to the table in an interview that actually went out before the episode aired. I do like that for once the monster or the alien, because I'm not going to call him a villain, he wasn't killed, he just escaped. So theoretically, he could return. Whether he does or not, I suppose that might depend on fan feedback and whether Stephen Moffat thought it was a good episode or not. Another thing that was not that great about the ending is we're back to the sonic screwdriver being a magic wand again that can do anything. But unlike last week, it wasn't as overused. In fact, the sonic screwdriver didn't get that much action. Its main purpose is to set up the whole Chekhov's gun. Sets up the whole gambit at the end with Skeldak with his finger on the button and the Doctor with his finger on the button of the sonic screwdriver. It actually makes sense in a science fiction context that it could control the submarine. It's a lot less stupid than being able to hold up a giant stone door. I'm sorry for ranting about that again, but really, that part of last week's episode really annoyed me because it just felt like, well, what are we going to do to have the Doctor get out of this? Use the sonic screwdriver. Okay then. Clara giving in and ending up singing Hungry Like the Wolf felt very forced, and it was an attempt to give her character a moment, a character moment. Again, possibly not the best choice of words. But she did redeem herself when she said, "Save the world then? That's what we do." That was a very good line. She's learning about life with the Doctor very quickly, and it's very interesting how fast she's coming around to the idea that the Doctor saves the world, or saves the planet, or saves whoever it is. And maybe that's going to come into play later when she finds out they don't always save the day. They don't always save everybody. Okay, fair enough. They didn't actually do that with this episode because Skeldak did kill quite a few people before he left. Now, the final scene where they were outside the submarine was quite funny, especially when the captain started laughing at the Doctor's request to drop them off at the South Pole. Although, why you would go out when you're in a submarine up and into the North Pole in just military jackets, or whatever the hell the professor was wearing, when you would most likely either freeze to death or be attacked by a polar bear, God only knows. And it was kind of strange how happy the captain was that they'd just, considering that they'd just narrowly avoided nuclear Armageddon and lost several of his men to the Ice Warrior, which they then just let leave without any attempt to kill it or any questions asked. But then again, I suppose greater good was more important, and early on the captain did give a speech saying, "We are all expendable." Again, I suppose Soviet mentality, but I'm not going to go into that because that might be kind of controversial. The nice touch at the end with the spaceship, the Ice Warrior spaceship, leaving, and the music played during that little moment was at the end of the Power of Three, although I would question whether it's more suitable here, where a spaceship trails off into the distance to end the episode, or when the Doctor and his two companions go into the TARDIS. I'm not going to bring up the Power of Three because I was disappointed with that episode, and also it reminds me of just how heartbreaking the Angels Take Manhattan was just a week later on. Overall then, this was a really good and exciting episode. It's probably my favourite episode of the short series so far. and that was partly because it reminded me of Dalek a lot. Both in terms of its storyline, where you've got the last of a warrior species, finds itself in unfamiliar surroundings, goes berserk, kills a bunch of people, and in the end, human contact, or its honour, softens the creature's stance and saves the day. Of course, here, Skylab lived. In Dalek, the Dalek blew itself up because it had become too human. And also the setting, you had a military base in Dalek, and a submarine here in Cold War. We didn't get many hints, or in fact we got nothing, in terms of Clara's true identity in the way of hints, but we did get some more development for her character, which for the most part came off pretty well. Matt Smith, while again his acting was pretty good throughout, the Doctor didn't... I would say he wasn't almost the main focus of the episode. Skylab was. And also the whole Cold War setting, although of course, again, it's the Doctor that saves the day, not the companion. Although again, no, actually, if it wasn't for Clara reminding Skylab of his daughter, he might have pressed the button, and the Doctor might have had to blow the sub to Kingdom Come and everybody on it. So okay, once again, it's Clara who technically saves the day here. I just realised that doing the review. That wasn't actually in my notes. Fantastic reintroduction for the Ice Warriors 2, I would say, and this is probably Mark Gatiss' best story to date. Not that there are that many contenders, because some of his stories have been okay, and some of them have been dire. His best ones up prior to this one were probably The Unquiet Dead, way back in Series 1, and Victory of the Daleks, although the latter was ruined by a god-awful finish to it. Next time we have Hyde. This looks to be a good old-fashioned ghost story. They've got a big-time actor in there in the form of Doug Ray Scott, who's been in other things, Ripley's Game and Mission Impossible 2. As I say, big-time Hollywood actor. Plus an up-and-comer in the form of Jessica Raine, who's probably best known over here for playing the lead in the BBC Sunday night drama Call the Midwife. Anyone who's not from the UK will have no clue what I've just mentioned. There also seems to be some action set on either an alien planet or other locations, so unless that's an illusion of some kind, the story won't all be set in the house, which is interesting, because when the initial details about the episode first came out, I thought it's all going to be set inside the house. It looks very creepy and atmospheric, and it looks to be a very minimal cast, so hopefully there'll be ample time to flesh the story out without rushing through it and leaving out vital bits, like other stories have suffered in the past that there's got so much to cram in, and in a short space of 45 minutes, that they either miss things out altogether or rush through it. But that's for next time. So I hope you enjoyed this review of Cold War. If you have any comments to make, please do not hesitate to make them. I love it when people start a good debate about my videos. That may sound slightly egotistical, but I like it when people get involved, and if there's something I've said here that you do not agree with, tell me. We all have the right of free speech, so if I've said something that offended you, or you didn't agree with, or you did agree with, tell me. The comments are there for a reason, people. Now that shameless plug is out of the way, join me next time for the review of Hyde. Until then, bye for now.